Good morning. I just want to preface this by explaining I'm just a member of the congregation. I'm not a leader as far as the services. My brother-in-law, David Frank, does help us lead services. Of course, living in Israel for 19 years helped him with some of that. But I'm going to give you, as I understood it, was an idea of the joy and the experiences of Passover, and especially the Passover Seder. Fred and Debbie keep me in line. They join us for the Seder, and they're always there, and they'll make sure I stay on track. I do want to say in the Torah portion, of course the Torah is the 5 books of Moses, when they talk about the Red Sea and the closing of the Red Sea and the death of the Egyptians, when the Israelites or the Jews were celebrating at the death of the Egyptians, God spoke and he was very upset as he said, they're my people too, and they died. He says, this is not good, to kind of translate the way it comes out of the Torah. So it was like to remind us that this was a death, that we saw people dying. And so it's not something really to celebrate, but to go on and make something of ourselves. So I made some notes, and I'll try and keep myself on track, and I'm not going to go over if I can help it. But Passover, especially the Seder, is a joyous time. It's our escape from slavery. So when we celebrate the Seder, it is a celebration. That's why there's 4 cups of wine in there to kind of help make sure you celebrate. But it is an enjoyable time, but it's also important to remember why it's there. And so we'll go through a week of Passover where you're having a special diet to remember what it's like to be a slave in Egypt. So I'm going to kind of concentrate on the Seder. Has anybody here been to a Seder? So if I, don't sound like I know what I'm talking about, you have to remind me that, hey, you don't know what you're talking about. But I'm going to go from like childhood, and now it is something you remember. There's different traditions. There's like in major holidays of any kind, there's family traditions, and there's the congregational traditions. We're Reform Judaism, and so we have 2 Seders. The first night is the family Seder. The second night is the temple Seder. If you're more conservative or Orthodox, there'll be a 3rd Seder on the last night of Passover. Reform Judaism, Passover is 7 days. Orthodox, it's 8. So there's some variations, and it would take my rabbi, I think, to properly explain it. So we'll just kind of leave it at that, because there's different parts of Judaism, and in the U.S. especially, there's a lot of reform, and Jackson is a reform. So it's in the Seder, the idea is to get together, and we have our own traditions, and they're going to vary from congregation to congregation and family to family, but they kind of follow a theme. And one of the things we do to follow the Seder is we have a Haggadah, which is like a prayer book, if you will. If anything, it's a guidebook to help us through this. And you start off, the leader of the Seder has a big plate. It's called a Seder plate, strange enough. And on it are the Hebrew symbols and where you put the special ceremonial foods. So the first part of the Seder, you've got this all set up, and you are eating some of these ceremonial foods with an explanation. So you'll have an herb, usually parsley. You have a bitter herb. You have charosis, which is actually this wonderful concoction of apples, nuts, wine, usually a dried fruit like raisins or cherries or dates, and sometimes some honey to make it even sweeter. And you'll have an egg. You'll have, very importantly, a lamb shank bone. Though being Reformed, sometimes when my mom made chicken instead of lamb, it might be a chicken leg bone because the butcher didn't have a lamb shank bone. So, you do what you can, but it's meant to be a lamb shank bone because of the importance of the lamb and lamb's blood in Passover. Of course, Passover, the angel of death passed over the Jewish homes in Egypt because they had taken the lamb's blood and put it on the doorway to identify it. And those other homes, they lost the firstborn. Or if you're more traditional Judaism, they lost the firstborn son. So all these different foods have different meanings. The parsley you end up dipping twice in salt water. The salt water represents the tears from slavery. The bitter herb usually is eaten on a piece of matzah, and that represents the bitterness of being in slavery. The harosis, which really is very good, but represents the mortar that was used to hold the stones together for Pharaoh's buildings. There is an egg, which there's some different interpretations, but the egg represents life. We look at it also as like spring. The shank bone we've discussed, but also very important, you'll have 3 pieces of matzah. The middle piece is called the afikomen, the dessert. And towards the beginning of the ceremony, the leader in a home, it's traditional as the oldest male of the home, but it's anyone now. I mean, we're Reformed, so it's whoever wants to, and sometimes you invite a guest to lead the service, but you break it in 2 pieces. It's covered, sometimes there's a ceremonial cloth you put it in, sometimes it's covered in a napkin, depending upon what you want to do. But you break this afikomen in 2 pieces. Now, this is important, and we'll get to this in a little bit. So you go through the service, and I've kind of marked certain things that are kind of fun and kind of interesting and important part of the Passover Seder. As you're going along, you get to the 4 questions, and usually it's children that read the 4 questions. So why is this night different from all other nights? Then the questions. On all other nights, we eat either leavened bread or matzah. Why on this night only matzah? On all other nights, we eat all kinds of herbs. On this night, we especially eat bitter herbs. On all other nights, we do not dip herbs at all. On this night, we dip them twice. On all other nights, we eat in an ordinary manner. Tonight, we dine with special ceremony. So it's going on to explain to the children about why we're together and what this is about. It does go on to 4 different participants, and we always have fun with this because we'll pass, read a paragraph, we'll pass it on, and I'm always happy when, like, my little sister got the wicked person, but I'll go through this. The wise person asks, what are the precepts, laws, and observances which Adonai our God commanded us? A lot of words. In response, we should explain the observances of the Passover thoroughly, the very last one of which is after the Passover Seder, we do not turn to other types of entertainment. It is the wise who want to know the service it is theirs to do. Then you come to the wicked person. What is this observance to you? Well, since he asks to you and not to us, he rejects the essentials of our faith, the unity of God and the community of Israel. Thus we respond sharply. It is because of what God did for me when I went forth from Egypt, for me that is, and not for you. For had you been there, you would not have known redemption. The wicked one withdraws the self from anything beyond the self, and thus the joy of redemption. And then my sister always liked it when I was the simple one to ask. And when the simple person asks, what is this? Then we say, with a mighty arm, God freed us from Egypt, from the house of bondage. To the person of open simplicity, give a straightforward answer. The Torah of God makes wise the simple. Then is the one who's unable to ask. So it is written, you shall tell the child on that day, saying, this is because of what God did for me when I went free from Egypt. And you go into the story of Passover. So it's very important then you go through that. And again, different families will go through it. And sometimes after a couple of glasses of wine, they go through certain parts a little faster than others. But the idea is it's a celebration, but it's also important to remember why we're together. An interesting part is when they go through the plagues. If you remember, there's 10 plagues that hit Egypt as Moses is trying to get Pharaoh to let our people go. And a tradition is that you have the cup of wine and you dip a finger in and you put a drop on the plate for each of the 10 plagues. And the plagues are blood, frogs, lice, wild beasts, blight, boils, hail, locusts, darkness, and then finally, slaying of the firstborn. So I would have brought enough of these for all of you, but we kind of need them this week, so I was told that. And we get into some fun traditions. There's a process you're going through. I don't know if you want to call it a prayer. We just call it dayenu. Dayenu meaning it would have been enough, where you go through different events that happened, and it's a good time. And there's a lot of singing and chanting, and I am not going to do it for you because unlike my big sister, I can't hit a note. Now, when I played an instrument, I could tune the instrument and I could hit the notes, but I cannot do it with my voice. I won't torture you with that. But to start, and I'll paraphrase some things, but to start, it says, had God brought us out of Egypt and not divided the sea for us, dayenu, that would have been enough. Had God divided the sea and not permitted us to cross on dry land, dayenu. And then it goes on, sustained us for 40 years in the desert and not fed us with manna, dayenu. Had he fed us with manna? And it goes on, so that each of the events, any one of which, would have been enough. So there is a tradition, let's see here. Okay, one of the things that I do remember, and I still notice it, is especially, the temple has the Haggadahs, we've had them for many years, and so everybody's there. As you approach the main meal, the pages start getting dirty. There's food that was spilled on it, so then you know dinner's coming soon. But I'm going to come back to the Afikomen. Remember I said that the leader or the rabbi broke it in two? All right. Before dinner, or when it says dinner is served, but just before that, the leader is supposed to get up and wash his hands. Well, different families and different congregations may have traditions, but the idea is you're there for fun and you need to entertain young ones. And you've been telling them the story, so telling them a story is a lot of fun and they're interested and such. But there's also some games. Well, the Afikomen is the dessert. After the meal, you cannot start to finish the whole service unless you've had the Afikomen. So, and when we did the Seder at my grandparents in Petoskey, when my grandfather would get up to wash his hands, the children would steal half the Afikomen. Very careful, because if you break it, you may be out of luck. And we would hide it and hold it for ransom. My grandfather always had silver dollars, enough for each grandchild, that he would have to pay us off with, and we'd negotiate. I'll give you a penny. We'd say $20. And so we knew what it was going to end up being, but it was for the fun. And then we'd produce the Afikomen, and you take the other half that's there, and you have to make sure they fit. You don't want, a fake. We would have fun with it. At the temple and a lot of other families, the leader, when they get up to wash their hands, hide the Afikomen. And then the children go find it. So the one who finds it gets the biggest prize. At the temple, the one who finds it gets the biggest prize, but they all get a bunch of candy, which is great. Now you've fed them, they've got blood sugar, you're giving them all kinds of candy, and they got to sit down for the rest of this? It's the fun part. Then there'll be traditional foods. I kind of mentioned chicken or lamb. My mom would almost always have lamb. Of course, that's how you get a shank bone, right? Leg of lamb, now you've got it. But it all varies. But the idea is it's kosher for Passover, meaning that it doesn't have any leavening in it. So you're eating a little different during Passover to remember what it's all about. But it's fun. Elijah, everyone here know who Elijah was, the prophet? Well, a really fun part of the Seder is Elijah visits every Seder. And at the beginning of the Seder, you have a cup of wine sitting usually next to the Seder plate. And as kids, we'd always point out to the younger kids, now look, see what the level of wine is? Wait. And after dinner, there's a spot where Elijah comes to visit. So the children get to go open the door so Elijah can come in. And he's there, and then he turns around and he heads back out. They hold the door open for him. We tell him when they can close it. If Passover is early, we're usually having Elijah move quickly because all the cold air is coming in. And you always point out then to the younger ones, look, the level of the wine is a little lower. Well, he didn't drink very much. Well, if you go to all those Seders, try and walk from one Seder to the other. So you got to be careful. So there are some other traditions. Again, the idea is this is lighthearted. This is a celebration, but you want to remember what it was about. But there's some different funds. I'm kind of looking at Fred and Debbie. You remember Who Knows One? Of course, this is a lot of fun. The verses keep getting longer. So I'll give you some of them and then go on. Otherwise, we'll be here for the entire length of a Seder if I go through the whole thing. But who knows one? I know one. One is our God in heaven and on earth. Well, at Temple Beth Israel is a tradition where the person who was able to finish the fastest stands up, and then people will challenge them to see who can read these verses faster. Well, obviously, the first one's not bad. It's pretty fast. The second one is they keep adding a verse. Who knows two? I know two. Two are the tablets of the commandments. One is our God in heaven and on earth. So now we're going on more. Now, I'm not much of a challenger because I cannot read it that fast. But it goes to 13. Now, in this Haggadah, 13 is even more of a challenge because it starts on one page and you have to turn it to go to the next. So who knows 13? I know 13. 13 are the attributes of God. 12 are the tribes of Israel. 11 were the stars in Joseph's dream. 10 commandments were given on Sinai. 9 is the number of the holidays. 8 are the days of the service of the covenant. 7 days there are in a week. 6 sections of the Mishnah has. 5 books there are in the Torah. 4 is the number of the matriarchs. 3 is the number of patriarchs. 2 are the tablets of the commandments. 1 is our God in heaven and on earth. And it goes by really fast with the good people who know how to read this. But it's fun. Everyone's having a good time. They're cheering on people. Then there's some other things which, Dayenu, which we went through, and then this one is called Hadgayah, an only kid, an only kid. Now, in this case, the only kid doesn't mean it's an only child. It means it's a goat. It's a baby goat. So you start off, an only kid, my father bought for 2 zuzim, Hadgayah, and then they sing it. I'm not going to chant it for you because I'm not going to torture you. Then came the cat and ate the kid, and you go to the chorus. Then came the dog and bit the cat that ate the kid, and you go to a chorus. Now understand, we've divided at the congregation different sections of people to represent the item or the animal that's in Dayenu. So you're making noises. So probably one of the best ones that got started, and it's just continued ever since, is one of our congregational members, who's just a great person anyways, played the little child. So when they said an only kid, then it's like, are we there yet? So you each bring what you want to just for the fun of this. So then you come to number 9. Then came the Holy One, blessed be he. That's usually the rabbi gets to be the Holy One. And destroyed the angel of death that slew the butcher, that killed the ox, that drank the water, that quenched the fire, that burned the stick, that beat the dog, that bit the cat, that ate the kid. You have a good time with it. Afterwards, there are songs and other things. The idea is that it's important to remember the story of being slaves and being saved by God and being led out of Egypt to eventually get to the land of Israel and get the 10 Commandments in the process. It's all a very important part, and you celebrate it because these were all great things that happened. Now, the people who were doing it didn't think it was so great because they weren't real happy in the desert. They weren't real happy as slaves, but it is a celebration. We're free, we're able to do this. Traditions are you'll have a setting, an empty setting. representing those who are in countries or lands where they cannot celebrate. You traditionally invite people into your home for it. Of course, the more people, the more fun you have. But many places, a tradition is to invite homeless in, whether it's at the congregational or into your home. So it's all to celebrate it and to help others if you can as part of it. So was I on track? Did I get that taken care of? Okay, good. Thank you. So are there questions? I think I got done on time. Oh, well, that was, oh, go ahead.
Who was the pharaoh at the time?
Ramses.
Thank you.
Didn't you ever watch the Ten Commandments? Exactly. That was a great movie. I loved it. Special effects. Do you know the special effects for the dividing of the sea? I think that was the greatest. I don't know who had the idea of using Jell-O, but it was phenomenal. Any other questions? You guys are this nice to me? Come on. You need to stump me so I can ask my brother-in-law to come back here and let you know what the real answer is. Rabbi gets mad at me when I make up answers. So. Well, thank you for having me here. I appreciate it.